this is this fourth section of Lecture 6 about Iraq. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the clip that I've taken from a documentary called Invisible War, which was made in 2012. And I'm just going to give you the stats. So what I'm going to keep in this discussion, where I'm going to talk, is the statistics. And I'm going to set aside the story that one of the soldiers tells about her rape. She's a sailor, actually. And I'm going to put that in a separate link on OWL, so that if you want to see it, you can see it. And if not, you won't be subjected to it here. So you don't have to worry about this section. I'm just going to talk about numbers, which is not as though that's easy, but the personal account I will leave, and you can see it if you wish. I highly recommend it. She's great. I mean, this woman who, she's this witness. She's obviously enormously brave to have made this, to have borne witness to what happened to her, to be able to speak out, not be able to, but to, I'm sure she had to force herself to speak out about it. So I think that's worth paying attention to. If it's possible for you to see it, please see it. If you can't see it, I get it. She is not graphic about it. She explains basically what leads up to it, what happens, which is like she says, and then I was raped. That's it. And there's no more graphic discussion. And then, but really, what's more important is sort of what the way the military deals with it, and what the aftermath, effectively. And that's what I would like you to see. So, okay. So here's a brief reminder about rape in numbers. Okay, and I'm using numbers from 2012 because the numbers are unreliable, and it gets tricky, and so you want to use numbers that are reliable, that have actually been vetted and have been cleared. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so here's a little clip from Invisible War, which is only about numbers. Okay, so check this out.
In 1991, in congressional testimony, it was estimated that 200,000 women had been sexually assaulted so far in the U.S. military. If you take into account that women don't report because of the extreme retaliation, and that was, more than a decade ago, I would say you could easily double that number, and it's probably somewhere near about 500,000 women have now been sexually assaulted in the U.S. military.
Well, according to the Department of Defense, 3,230 women and men reported assault in the last fiscal year 2009. But they also admit, DOD itself, that 80% of sexual assault survivors do not report. So if you do the math, 16,150 service members were assaulted, which is an extraordinary number.
All right, so let's come back to this. In 2012, there were 26,000 rapes. Somewhat fewer in 2013, but not by many. Of the estimated 23,000 rapes here, this is an unclear number, between, say, 2014 and 2012, it's like, where exactly does this number lie? So we're working with this estimate of 23,000. The Pentagon has said that there were, because we don't know, right? How many, or it's an estimate. It's like, given this, yeah, it's an estimate. So the Pentagon says that how many were reported? It's like, well, so now I'm quoting from a New York Times story. The Pentagon has said that of the 5,061 reported cases, okay, so there were 5,061 reported cases, okay. Of those, 484 went to trial. Okay, so less than 10%, right? And of the 484 that went to trial, there were 376 convictions. Okay. So that's 376 convictions out of what we think is 23,000 actual rapes, which is, in other words, a conviction rate of 0.016%, right? So it's bad news. Now, I should say that the male-on-male rape rate is actually at the moment higher. It has been for the last few years. Well, it was in 2012. It was higher than the male on female rape rate. So, although there were more male on male rapes, the overall number is lower because most of the military, 85% of it, is male, right? So you've got a larger number of rapes, but proportionally it's smaller to the population, right? So you may have 27,000 rapes of men on men, but you've got a population of, let's say, I don't know, 450,000 men. So it's relatively small, as opposed to a population of 15% women, which is going to be like maybe, I don't know, 50,000 people, something like that, and 26,000 of them have been raped. It wouldn't actually be that high. So the proportion is huge. Right? There is also the case of the rape, what is called the rape camps, what were called the rape camps in the Bosnian Serbian War between 1990 and 1995. This is the war in eastern Bosnia, which is covered by Joe Sacco in his book Safe Area Gorazde. And one of the things that the Serbs, largely Christian, and Bosnians, Muslim, was to take women prisoner by the thousands, actually the tens of thousands. We don't know how many. The upper end of the numbers are 50,000. The lower end, 12,000. It's really inconceivable to me how it's. I mean, that just gives you an idea of just how little we know. How little we know. The policy. This was policy. The policy was to take women into these camps and rape them, and until they were pregnant, and then release them, and have them go home. And when they got home, if they got there, if they didn't commit suicide on their way or try to have an abortion and die of that, or go to some other country or become a refugee or any number of things that somebody might do if they're desperate. But if they did go home, if they weren't showing that they were pregnant, they might be taken in by the family, maybe. They might have their suspicions that the daughter had been raped. Or the mother, for that matter, because it might very well be that you're going to collect all the women, all the female people in the household, everybody with a vagina. Let me put it that way. If it's discovered they're pregnant, they will likely be thrown out of the house because you've got Muslim women who have first of all been defiled. Okay, so that's a big problem, and these are deeply traditional societies. So it's not about, we'll raise them as Muslims, we'll raise the children as Muslims. It's like, no. First of all, the baby isn't a Muslim anymore because its father was Christian. And that's the way this particular genocide works. It's the genius of it is so completely screwed up and evil that basically you are polluting, quote unquote, the Muslim population with non-Muslims. Well, the Muslims weren't going to stand for that. They're like, no, get out of here. So they put the woman out. And she's been meanwhile trained that all life is precious and valuable and so on. So abortion is forbidden. So she's not going to have an abortion. So she's going to have the child. But then she also may try to leave the child somewhere if she survives, because she's got to find somebody who can help her. Because who's going to help her? The whole Muslim community is going to turn against her. So you've got this enormous cultural problem. It's essentially a genocide. And yet at the same time, it isn't, because what you're doing is you're creating life. So you're killing off a population by creating life. As I say, meanwhile, we're of course talking about the people who survive, let alone the people who, are in these rape camps. And I don't know how you would survive something like that. And this is the same issue as the comfort women, the Korean comfort women who were taken prisoner by the Japanese and shipped all over the world, basically, while they were fighting the Second World War, to be chained prostitutes. And the comfort women have gone on trying to get justice, quote unquote, from the Abe government in Japan, and he won't acknowledge that it ever was a thing. Okay. So this is rape by policy, and how this is not a war crime, I do not understand. I don't get it. So Enloe helps to clarify the kind of situation that makes such an atrocity happen. If you're interested in the situation in eastern Bosnia, then have a look at a book which is, I suspect it would be available, called Rape. I think it's just called Rape Warfare. Yeah. So, Enloe clarifies. In other words, the militarization of women's beauty in wartime Iraq wasn't occurring in a vacuum. It was occurring in an environment where the contest was escalating between a patriarchally mobilized version of religion on the one side, and on the other, media companies that were further sexualizing and commercializing women's bodies. So you got to choose a side. It's like, which one are you going to choose here? Right? This is page 35 of Enloe. But women in the supposedly, powerful and free democratic forces of America turned out to have a bad situation on their hands as well, as you have seen, right? And Montoya is very clear about this. She says, you know how I told you there are only 3 kinds of female you're allowed to be in the military? A bitch, a hoe, and a dyke? Or a dyke, 167. Well, we've heard that before, right? We heard that from Kayla Williams right away. And it's very clear when you look at the records, everybody says that. Every woman who talks about this, who is not an officer, I should point out, talks about this. They also talk about the fact that their bladders are screwed up. Well, why? The reason why is that if you're on a base, let's say you're on a base camp, and Montoya says, everybody's bladder got screwed up. I came back and I couldn't hold my pee. I'm 21 and I have an old lady's bladder. I don't know a single girl from the military who doesn't on 170, right? Okay, so what's the story? Well, you're supposed to have a battle buddy to go to the bathroom with, because, and these are porta potties, basically, they were the holes were dug by third-party nationals, right? And so you go to the porta potty. Well, the number of rapes that occurred on, near, at, inside porta potties is just incalculable. So knowing that, the military began to advise its own, like be all you can be, right? Its own soldiers. If you're going to the bathroom, don't go alone. Go with a friend. And don't go with a male friend. Go with a female friend. Because your female friend and one person carries the gun. And if you have to threaten another soldier with a gun to stop them from raping you, that's what you're going to do. Now, if you can't carry your gun because you're inside a rear area, as it's called, like a fortress or a base, then you carry a knife. Because that may be illegal, but you can hide it and it's quiet, right? So then you're going to test somebody's will. Do they really want to rape you? Or are they prepared to go up against a knife? What about 2 people and so on? So the idea is to prevent the rape from happening. But it's so common and the danger of it is so high that so now it's, say, 2 a.m. and you have to pee. So you got to wake up another woman to go with you. Or they've got to wake you up. And you're delighted, of course, to be woken up. You just came in from 12 hours in a Humvee, sitting in a Humvee, getting baked, and not being able to drink enough, because if you drink too much, then you have to pee. And if you have to pee, you got to go out and you got to face men, because all around you are going to be men. Somebody is going to be a rapist in that group, basically, is because people are just like that's a war zone. What the hell? So no rules apply. Despite the rules of engagement, which, remember, this is the theory, right? Theory, practice, reality, theory. So you take your buddy, and, well, if you can't take your buddy, then you bloody well hold it. And you hold it until basically your muscles are shot. So you're 21 years old, and you can't, your muscles are stretched, right? They're shot. There's no muscle tone anymore. So the bladder problem tells it all. That women are terrified to go out in their own camps. I'm not talking about when they're out on a logger or they're out on a mission somewhere in some village and somebody has to go out, behind the barn equivalent, and it's like, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in a base, in what is called a FOB, right, a forward operating base. And so Montoya says on page 174 what we have already known, right? That military women choose a boyfriend or a husband to protect themselves from their predatory colleagues, which is the same thing. And this is why I referred us to Anonyma's book, A Woman in Berlin, earlier, and the film, because she survives 3 to 4 rapes a day by the Russian soldiers, until she's like, okay, I got to make this stop. What am I going to do? And she's very, very clever about this. She's like, I got to find an alpha male. And so she finds herself a Russian officer who is sufficiently high enough in the military that he has real weight in the military. Like the men are like, oh yeah, they're going to do what he says. So when it becomes clear that she is his woman and essentially is his battlefield wife, then they leave her alone. The rape stopped because she's been taken. And she's now forbidden to them. So they're like, okay, we'll rape other people. And they did. So the same thing is true here. Find an alpha male. So in the end, the best strategy is still to find a man. Not Prince Charming, be damned to that. A man who is tough. And essentially, if you have to accept rape, accept one rape from one person instead of many rapes from many people when you don't know they're coming, basically. How anybody survives this, I have no idea. I don't know. Okay, so what can we take away from today? So here are some final points. Okay. So when we talk about women's space in wartime being restricted, ultimately being eliminated, what I want you to get is that the best way to survive, I guess, if you insist on going to war, is to go to war as an officer, if you're a woman. But remember that as you prepare to go to war, who are you making war on? Because it's probably a civilian population somewhere where women are probably getting the short end of the stick already. And their end is going to get shorter until there is no more end, until they just basically are forced into nothingness. So consider that. The second thing is that when men come into this space and essentially push women out of their own space, so there is nothing left, you bomb out the salons and you bomb out the homes, and basically you've got people living in, as we see in the Chechen Women section by Joe Sacco, you've got women living in sort of families where the father or the male in the family may very well have been killed because he was taken off to be a soldier or whatever. So what you've got is a mother and a bunch of children who are left. She may be forced into some kind of essentially industrial space, which is just like, this is the only place that's left. Then you've got this dehumanization of women, which brings on, well, these two things are co-constitutive. It brings on a rape culture, but rape culture also dehumanizes women. So it's like, as far as I'm concerned, start this, get that. It's like, yeah, I don't see a real difference between these two in many ways. And the final thing is that if you don't consider rape to be a war crime, then it's just going to go on in these fantastic numbers that we're seeing, these unbelievable, staggering, bloody numbers. And the point for me is that, well, why has this not passed at the UN? And I think it has not passed because I think that men understand that essentially rape always comes with war, and it's always terrible, and it can't be prevented because men are who they are. So there's this, again, sort of this discussion of like, is it essential? Is there at the core of a man's identity that all men are effectively rapists? And many, many people believe that. Okay.